Okay, I know what you're thinking. This is just clickbait. This is going to lead nowhere. But I promise you there's some actual evidence that skateboarding may have come from the Nazis. I was as surprised as you are, and I'll tell you all about it. Welcome back to Rad Rat Video, a channel where you can learn new things about skateboarding. I talk about all kinds of different things on the channel, from teaching tricks, talking about skateboarding topics, skateboarding video games, and sometimes something just kind of weird, like if Nazis are responsible for skateboarding, which is pretty crazy. So to recap what I've talked about on the channel so far, way back in Ask Rad Rat 56, I think it was, this was about 2 years ago, I talked about the history of skateboarding, like the first commercial skateboards, how far back you can go and seeing the first kid actually riding around on a skateboard. So the history we all know is in California, sometime in the 60s or so, there were kids who were taking the wheels off their skates and putting them on 2x4s and they were riding them around. So I looked into that a bit. In 61 and 62, there started to be commercially available skateboards that look like actual skateboards that were shaped, customized to skate around on. You go back a little bit further into the 50s and you start to get kids doing that themselves, just doing it in their garage, making their own skateboards and stuff like that. And you try to think about, like, who could have been the first one who did it? Let's look at it. Let's try to figure out the right guy. Let's find some story about a kid who did it first. But we're still actually way off, because I found a really weird story which took place in 1944 in France. Someone named Betty Magnuson saw some kids in the Montmartre section of Paris, France, riding around on homemade skateboards in 1944. And that was a big shock to me, and a lot of people in the comments too. They didn't realize that skateboarding was actually being done in Europe in the 40s, which was pretty crazy. And of course there was stuff before that. There was scooters came before that. There were scooters that you could take the handlebar off of and stuff like that. But to be a skateboard, it's kind of tougher to define, right? Because you got to be able to turn on it without the use of handlebars. You got to be able to ride it around like you would think you can on a skateboard. You should be able to lean and turn and stuff like that. So that stuff didn't really count. But with the skates, they had trucks on them. That was a real skateboard in 1944. And that was really interesting. And in that video, I said that if you knew of anything earlier, send it to me. And I was going to make a finished video about that at some point in the future. I forgot that I ever said that. I was surprised when I watched that back just now, but I never did that. But I did finally get a tip from someone named Fernando. He sent me an email where he found an article on the Red Bull site, although it's in Spanish only. I wasn't able to find an English version. He wasn't either. But it talks about how this guy named Joseph Goebel may have been involved in skateboarding. And to get you up to date with this guy, horrible Nazi dude, really high up, and I'll actually read the first part of his bio. A German Nazi politician and Reich Minister of Propaganda in Nazi Germany from 1933 to 1945. He was one of Adolf Hitler's closest and most devoted associates and was known for his skills in public speaking and his deeply virulent anti-Semitism, which was evident in his publicly voiced views. He advocated progressively harsher discrimination, including the extermination of the Jews in the Holocaust. So this guy was actually pressuring Hitler to do even worse things than he already was. Just a horrible waste of human flesh. And he actually became the Chancellor of Germany for a day after Hitler killed himself, but before he also died and maybe killed himself too. I don't know. I didn't get into the World War II history, just the skateboarding history part of it. But where does this dude fit into skateboarding history? Well, his kids were shredders. So there's some footage of some high up Nazi dude that came over to his house in 1943. It's a year before that French account from before, in 1943, and it shows his kids riding what looks like a skateboard down their slide. Take a look at this. So here's the thing, that looks like a skateboard. It doesn't look like a scooter with the handlebars taken off. It doesn't look like anything else. It's got a flat board part. It's got smaller skateboard size wheels, not like the big off-road tires on like a wagon or something like that. It looks like a real skateboard. It looks like a normal skateboard. And it's just, where would this thing have come from? In that the article on Red Bull, it says that it might have been something called a flexi racer, which were popular in the 30s, and this is what that looks like. And yeah, on this thing you have to lie down on it face first and ride like the kids were going down that slide, but there's these handlebars built into it. And there's really no evidence that the one in the footage has any kind of handlebars. If you pause it and you look close, it just looks like a board. So I'm not sure that that's what this was. Now, it's possible that it originally was one of those flexi racers and that it broke and that they just put a new board on top. Dad went out in the garage. Well, he's a high Nazi guy. He probably had some like indentured servant do it or whatever, but just put a new board on top of it and they didn't put in the steering mechanism. Who knows? And it's hard to say because the flexi racers had a fixed back axle. I almost called it a truck, but it's not a truck because it doesn't turn. And then the front axle that was turned with the handlebars. We don't see the one in the footage ever turn, so we don't know for sure whether it was like that. Maybe both axles were fixed and they only use it on their slide. Maybe it did actually have some turning capabilities that would make it a skateboard. Or maybe the method of turning doesn't count as far as whether it's a skateboard or not. I'll leave that up to you. But who knows, man? This guy was very rich and very powerful. He could have had this made. This might be the first ever skateboard made in a Nazi laboratory somewhere. It could have just been the kids with their skates like it happened in France the next year. We don't really know for sure. And the only way we could verify and double check this, maybe we find his kids. They'd be real old now, so maybe their kids or grandkids, maybe it's in the attic or a garage somewhere and they could check it out. But unfortunately, their dad was a horrible Nazi, and when he died, when he killed himself, he killed his whole family with him. He gave all the kids cyanide. So there's really no way to know exactly what this thing was. But to me, it really, really looks like a skateboard. But who knows? I'm hoping we find something a little bit earlier from somewhere not so horrible. That would be great, but as of right now, it does seem like this may be a legitimate part of skateboard history. I'm not sure. This is just what I found. I'd like to thank Fernando for sending that in. I appreciate it. And I will put a link to that below. It's only in Spanish, but you can use your translate function and get through it pretty well. So that's it for this really weird, one-of-a-kind episode. There's probably going to be some weird stuff in the future. I like to do little news things here and there, stuff like that as it comes up. Haven't been doing a lot of it lately, but hopefully we'll be getting back into the swing of things pretty soon. So make sure you subscribe to stay up to date with all that stuff as it comes out. And here are some more videos you can check out in the meantime. Thank you for watching.